So I wanted to speak this evening with you about the concept I mentioned in class the other day, but I don't think it was in your class, the other class actually, about Hashgocho Protis, and what the definition of Hashgocho Protis is. I think I mentioned your class too, but more briefly. And so this is I didn't write this. Actually, it's written by my brother-in-law. What you see on screen, he says the Hashgocho Protis, the best versus the chinuch. The best is to have proven the power of Hashgocho Protis to his talmidim. He had him follow an individual leaf which fell from a tree, and watch as it landed on top of a worm trapped out in a sunny field to provide it a little shade. You cannot find exact makor for this, but you find a reference here, etc., here, etc. So I'm not sure the story is accurate, but we do know that the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov did hold that Hashgocho Protis means that Hashem micromanages the entire creation to the smallest grain of sand. And the Rebbe Rabbeinu Parshishcha, one of the great Hasidic leaders in the third generation, he wrote that if you have a stick which is stuck into the sand, when you remove the stick from the sand, so particles, I know I lost you before, sorry. So again, let's do this again. This is from my brother, Rabbi Chaim Brown. Hashgocho Protis is Besh versus the Chinuch. The Besh, the Baal Shem Tov, is improving the power of Hashgocho Protis to his Talmidim. And the following individual leaf which fell from a tree and watched as it landed atop a worm trapped down in a sunny field to provide a little shade. I cannot find the exact makor, the source for this, but you can find a reference in various places. So the Rebbe Rabbeinu Parshishcha, who was one of the great leaders of the third generation Hasidus, writes that if you have a stand which is sticking into a pile of sand, which is sticking into a pile of sand, and you move the stick from the sand, so the grains of sand will fall into the hole which is made by that stick, which is just removed from there. And the Rebbe Rabbeinu was said to have said that if you don't believe that every grain of sand, which then falls back in the hole, falls into the place which Hashem decreed at that point in time, at that moment, that it should fall there, then you are you lack belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're apikores. So this statement of the Rebbe Rabbeinu, what we say about Shem Tov, indicates that Hashgocho Protis not only extends to human beings, to individuals, but also extends to grains of sand or to worms and leaves, and so on and so forth. So, as my brother writes here, conscious with the Sefer Chinuch in Parshas Mitzorah, which I quote, there are groups of people who think Hashem's Hashgocha encompasses everything in the world, all living creatures. In other words, animals and all things, meaning nothing moves in this world without God decreeing so. So they think if a leaf falls from a tree is because God decreed for it to fall. And it's impossible for it to fall a second earlier or later than the appointed time. The concept is far removed from intelligence. He says here, Rachok Harbei min haseichel. So the chinuch obviously does not hold, and most Rishonim did not hold of the Baal Shem Tov's perspective. They believed in the concept of nature. And nature means that Hashem created things to run in a certain way, and he doesn't necessarily interfere with them because it's not, the whole idea of nature is this is an optimum, an ideal way for the world to run itself. So therefore, nature will determine what happens to grains of sand, and natural law and science will be able to indicate what's going to happen. And same thing is true with leaves and with worms. So that takes away the idea of hashgacha from very, very minute processes, especially those that don't have to do with human beings. So the chinuch goes on to deny that to say that to deny hashgacha completely is also wrong. The correct philosophy is that there's general providence, hashgacha klalis, on all living things. So no species should become extinct, but not in particular creatures. And the Rambam also holds the same thing, that there is a general hashgacha which Hashem has on the world, which is that if let's say a species is about to go extinct, and Hashem doesn't want to go extinct, he'll intervene. But normally, things which have to do with entities which are not human, which are animal or vegetable or mineral, Hashem lets them go on their own particular way. So he says that incidentally, it says interesting here, even for the advent of the theory of evolution, this is why dinosaur bones caused such a ruckus, even to Christian theologians who share a similar view of extinction. Here is evidence of mass extinction having occurred contrary to this view of the chinuch and other Rishonim. But I don't see that the extinction of dinosaurs is a problem for the chinuch, unlike my brother-in-law, because I think that Hashem did decide that some species should be rendered extinct, or that they're that they should be left to whatever force of nature would drive them extinct. So therefore, yes, Hashem is, so to speak, concerned with the existence of a species, but it doesn't mean Hashem wants all species to exist at all times. So I don't have that problem, which he raises here. But he says Rambam Reuven takes essentially the same view. Hashgocho Klalis applies to all mankind, but excludes animal completely. So the Rambam takes it even a step further. He says that most human beings have Hashgocho Klalis. In other words, most human beings, not just non-Jews, but also Jews. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only involved with people to the extent of their level. The higher a person is, either in his tzidkus, his righteousness, or his chachma, his intellect, or perhaps even according to other Rishonim, his bitachon and trust Hashem, the higher a person is, the more Hashem is involved directly with that person on a constant basis. But the lower status, a person that was a lower stature, was not on that level, so Hashem is less involved with him directly, to the point that Hashem might not be involved in that person's life at all. Now, this is going without such things as tefillah. Obviously, we have tools by which we can try to get Hashem involved. We daven, we do mitzvahs, etc., etc. But on the Rambam, it says, without those tools, then Hashem is not necessarily involved, even with the human beings. The chinuch mentions animals, the Rambam even mentions human beings. And my brother writes, I discussed with Talmid Chacham of Shabbos, who could not offhand name a single Rishon who held of the broad view Hashgacha that the Baal Shem Tov spoke about. So, can anyone explain how and why Hasidus just dropped the approach Rishonim on this issue? And he says, don't give my welcome to the Rebbe Sicha, that's Lubavitcher Rebbe. I not fully understand it, so you have to explain it if you do. So there are very similar comments here, which about this issue. But this, my brother-in-law here, in response to a comment, it says, I want to hear some Rishon who will adopt the approach to the Besh. There's definitely societal trend to adopt the Beshtian mindset. How often have you heard of a story of the guy who Hashgacha Protis just missed a plane that crashed or lost his job only to get a better one, etc.? Rishonim I have seen do not think things work that way. They could, but not necessarily. So I'm skipping some of the comments here, so this is my comments, and this is usually, I say, usually those who follow Baal Shem Tov quote the following Gemara to explain why they believe what they believe about Hashgacha Protis. It's a Gemara in Tziyun Shalmi, Masechah Shvius, Daf Chaf Hey Beis. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Avi Tamir b'Ma'arta. Shimon Bar Yochai hid in a cave for Klalis for 13 years. B'Ma'aras Charuvin, the Truma. This is in a cave where, evidently a place called Truma, where there are carob trees from which he and his son ate for those years. Achel Gufa Chaluda, to the point that his body became rusty, whatever that means. The Saf Klalis after 13 years, he said, Lina Nafi Chamei, let me go out and see. Ma Kalab Alma. What news there is in the world? Nafi Vyasa Apun Marto. So he went out and sat on the opening of the cave. Tamachan Tzayod, he saw a hunter, Tzayid Siporin, who was hunting birds. Paras Mitzud Te, he spread his net. Shama Braskala. So Shimon Bar Yochai said, heard a voice coming out from Shamayim. Amra would said Dimus, which means innocent. Ishtazva tzipora, and that bird went free. And conversely, although it's not brought down here, it's brought down elsewhere. The Medrash, he heard a voice come from Shemaim, said specula, which means guilty or liable to be caught. And then that bird was caught by the hunter. He said, he said, if a bird is not caught unless they decree on it in Shamayim that it should be caught, and they agree it should not be caught, it's not caught. So certainly a human being like myself, and therefore he felt, okay, I can leave the cave because obviously anything that happens to me is what Hashem wants to happen. So from this, the Achronim, the later sources say, you know what, you see that even birds, Hashem decides what's going to happen to them at a micro level, each and every bird, and therefore Shimon Bar Yochai was able to come out of the cave because he saw that everything, even birds, have this level of hashgacha. The question, an obvious question is, Shimon Bar Yochai know this? If this is actually the case, you should have known this beforehand. But and therefore, I think that there's not a definite proof, because if really in this case, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was being sent a special message from Shamayim, and he was being sent a message from Shamayim that it's time for you to come out, and I'll take care of you, just like I take care of the birds. I say who's going to be caught, who's not going to be caught, not all the time, but in this message given to Shimon Bar Yochai, that was Hashem showed I can control these things. I can control also who can hurt you and who can't hurt you. So therefore come out of the cave. So that it's not evidence that, so to speak, the Baal Shem Tov's ideas are correct, but this is one of the sources that they bring. So I wrote over here afterwards. Personally, I believe the Baal Shem Tov proactively, that means he decided ahead of time, and deliberately compelled Hashem to change his hanhaga, and caused Hashem to change the way Hashem relates to the world. Now, we have a lot of times in Jewish history where there's a major shift in how people serve Hashem, how people relate to Hashem in many different ways. And the Baal Shem Tov himself was responsible for Hasidus coming about, which is a whole new way of relating to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Sure, it's based on things which happened in the past, but it was a revolution in how people related to Hashem. So there is this concept. It's related to the concept tzaddik goes over Kodesh Baruch Hu Mekayim. If a tzaddik makes a decree, Hashem follows that decree. So therefore, that's why, and therefore, if Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to save one of the boys who was embedded in the pyramids, so Hashem said, "Okay, go ahead." That's just on a small level. Moshe Rabbeinu dies, says, "Kill me if you don't save the Jewish people." So Hashem listens. So that's another example. So the tzaddik decides something and makes and either pleads with Hashem or demands of Hashem that should happen, and it happens. So that's why that is something which I think the Baal Shem Tov could have done, but it could be also a little bit differently, which is Hashem sent the Baal Shem Tov down into this world in order to have people believe more in Hashgocho Protis. In other words, Hashem decided, however I conduct the world till now, that was okay for those generations. But for these generations, people should have access to the idea of Hashgocho Protis and be able to live their lives according to that idea. Okay, so that in other words, there was a change that took place. So now, my brother-in-law asked a question on this. He says, the Gemara in Shabbos says that Rava would not cross a bridge that a non-Jew was sitting on, lest Hashem judge the non-Jew at that moment and collapse the bridge, taking him down as well. So we touched on it before on the concept of Hashgocho Protis. I do not understand how you read this Gemara if you adopt the best idea that Hashem directly supervises every action in the world down to the movement of a falling leaf. Why should Rav have been afraid? When Hashgocho Protis had protected him from injury, he was not deserving of punishment at that moment. So the truth is that he's going to go into some answers in the comments, but when he references one of the the Gemara which says that if a person is not supposed to walk under a wobbly wall, a wall which is in danger of falling, because they might look at heaven down and say, Reuven thinks he can walk by this wobbly wall and not have it fall down on him. Let's see if he's worthy of being saved. If we should make a miracle that it shouldn't fall down on him. We should just let it fall down on him. And he needs a lot of merit in order to save him from being hurt when that wall, if it's supposed to fall down, falls down at that point in time. So we see that there is this idea that Hashgocho Protis is not necessarily just let me alone. It takes into account circumstances. Even if you believe in Hashgocho Protis, which Rav on his Madrega certainly would have merited intense Hashgocho Protis, but it could because, again, as we say, it has to do with the level of the person. But again, if he puts himself in the wrong circumstances, excuse me, so then things can be, even for him, not what necessarily would have been his best possible outcome, but an outcome which is determined because of who's with him at that time, or an outcome which is determined because of things that are going on around him at that time. Whether it's because there's non-Jews there who doesn't deserve to be saved, who the bridge could even collapse, or whether it's the wall which might fall down. So therefore, we see that Hashgocho Protis, even when it's individual, is also influenced by other things outside of that person's own merits or demerits. Other people, other circumstances, which also come into play. My wife, he says, was my sister, but it's a different question from the same Gemara on the Rambam. According to Rambam, there's Hashgocho Protis on an individual level only for people closely connected to Hashem. Otherwise, everything is Hashgocho Klalis. So how could there be a din specific to an individual non-Jew sitting on a bridge? Isn't Hashgocho Protis at a very specific level? Which is a good question. Hashgocho Protis, we assume, only applies to big tzaddikim. So according to the Rishon, according to the Rambam in the Chinuch. So therefore, how could there be such a judgment on a non-Jew at that point in time? But I think the answer is the flip side, is that just like Hashem has direct connection and intervention with great tzaddikim, the same thing is true about great Rishonim. Hashem can sometimes Hashem decides, you know what, this Russia is so terrible, I have to do something about him, we're going to destroy him. So yeah, it could be with a Stam, a non-Jew, or a Stam, another Jew, then they would be under Hashgocho Klalis, and therefore wouldn't affect Rav at that time. But if there's a non-Jew, there's a very big Russia, so then it might be that there's Hashgocho Protis, just like for good, there's also Hashgocho Protis for bad, that person should suffer, and Rav will go down with him. And we have that in a similar thing in the by Yetzias Mitzrayim. By Yetzias Mitzrayim, it says nobody should leave their house until morning. And the Chazal say one of the reasons not supposed to leave in the morning is once the destroyer has permission to destroy, it doesn't distinguish between a tzaddik and a rasha. So they're very often when a tzaddik will perish, even though he doesn't deserve it, because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's what happened with the Jews, if any left their houses at the time that Hashem was doing Makas Bechoros. They too would have been subject to this Makkah, even though they didn't deserve it, because that's what was going on in Mitzrayim at the time. You need, again, if you're in a situation of danger, you need extra special protection. That's why it says, Chazal say, Shluchei mitzvah. People going to do mitzvahs, they don't get harmed. But they can get harmed in a place where it's very dangerous. So that means to say that, in a place which is not so dangerous, so Shluchei mitzvah have a special quality. The fact that they're going to do a mitzvah saves them from their potential dangers. But going to a place which is known to be dangerous, no longer applies. Because in that place, they are subject to that danger, and they need special merit if they're going to survive that. Okay, so this comment here says, well, yeah, it's no different than the Kir Natui, right? And the wall which is wobbly, like which I just said. So my brother writes back, I was thinking of that, but clearly one can be mechalik, one can see a difference between placing yourself in a clear makam sakana, a definite place of danger where the wall is about to fall, and place yourself in an ordinary situation, walking on a bridge, which is made dangerous only because of supernatural intervention of din, because Hashem decides the bridge is not to push it down, because the bridge is not poised to fall unless the non-Jew at that moment receives a punishment from Shammai. Okay, again, I don't see it as so difficult because, yeah, okay, there are, first of all, bridges in the old days were much less safe than they are today. And therefore, every time we went on a bridge was considered to be a little bit of a danger. And besides that, yeah, maybe Hashem at that moment is going to decide that that non-Jew is worthy of not being, of death. And therefore, is going to, Hashem is going to kill him and you're going to be schlepped along. So that's the second point. And then a third point over here, which is in the past 2 weeks, we've discussed the famous statement of Orach Chaim that a Baal Bechira, a person has free choice, can harm to someone, cause harm to someone, even if he or she doesn't deserve it. How is this possible? Doesn't Hashem's Hashgocho control everything that happens? Now he's referring here to an Orach Chaim in Bereshis. The Orach Chaim in Bereshis is here. It says about Ruvain that Ruvain saved Yosef from the brothers and threw him down into a pit. But Chazal say even though the pit was empty, Ein bo mayim, didn't have water, it had nechoshim akrabim, it had snakes and scorpions. So the question is, how is Ruvain saving Yosef from the hands of the brothers by throwing him down into a pit with snakes and scorpions? So the Orach Chaim says a fascinating thing. He says, Perush, Lefisha Adam Baal Bechira, because a person has free choice, Ratzon, and his own will. The Yochel Arog Mishalonis Chai Misa, he can kill somebody who doesn't deserve to die. Mashenka Chayos Ros, as opposed to wild animals, Lo Yifgu B'Adam, they won't be able to harm a person in Lo Yischai Misa Shemaim unless Hashem has decided that he's worthy of death. V'Omra B'Atzemi Yadam. That's why it says who saved him from the hands, saved Yosef from the hands of the brothers. Kimiyara Bechiri, from the hands of somebody who has free will. Was Sasa Omro, and with this they would contradict. They said, "Oh, let's see what's going to be with his dreams, Yosef's dreams." And Reuben's saying, if you kill him, then you haven't proven anything. Because you can't say kill him and let's see what's with his dreams. Their free choice can negate a dream which should have been fulfilled otherwise. So there's no evidence if they kill him that he was saying something which was false. It was true. They prevented him from happening. So the Orach Chaim is an amazing statement. The Orach Chaim says that if Shimon doesn't deserve to die. Shimon's supposed to live another 50 years. But Reuven comes along and decides to kill him, to assassinate him. So since Reuven has free will, Reuven can decide through his free will to kill Shimon, even though Shimon was not meant to die at that point. So what that means is that, yes, Hashem's Hashgacha is very, very strong, but it doesn't necessarily extend to stopping people who, with their own free will, have their own choice, want to inflict harm on you. Again, if a person is on a very, very high madrega, it's possible that Hashem will say, you know what, I'm not even going to let other people harm him. That happened with Nochem Ish Gamzu. Nochem Ish Gamzu always said Gamzu Tova was like on the highest madrega. So people wanted to harm him by replacing the silver and gold that he had brought as a present for the emperor with dirt from their house. And they stole the jewelry and they left the dirt, and Hashem made a miracle, and the dirt became arrows and spears when the Romans shot it at their enemies. So Hashem intervened to save him even from other human beings, not just from some natural occurrence, even from some other human beings. So, but that's everybody agree that that's only on a very, very high madrega that Hashem is going to intervene that way. The on a lower madrega, says Orach Chaim, and even Yosef HaTzadik would be subject perhaps to some other people's bechira, and even though something bad, he didn't deserve something bad to happen to him, other people can do bad stuff to him. Okay, so that's that. My brother-in-law said, in the past, we discussed the famous statement of Arachaim that a Baal Bechira, person has free choice, can cause harm to someone even if he or she doesn't deserve it. How is this possible? Doesn't Hashem's Hashgocho control everything that happens? So Rabbeinu Bechai, who was the Talmud of the Ramban, in Parshas Vayera writes that Hashem's Hashgocha on animals is Hashgocha Klalis. We've seen this already. It's only to the extent necessary to preserve the species, but does not govern each individual animals. Only humans have Hashgocha Protis on the individual. He then further divides Hashgocha Protis on people into two parts of level. One, Hashem's knowledge of events this applies to all people. Hashem knows everything which goes on in the world. Two, Hashem's protecting the individual from harm. This level of Hashgocha is only by the most righteous, only by the biggest tzaddikim. Okay, let's skip the parentheses. We can use the Rabbeinu Bechai's chiluk in order to formulate Orach Chaim's point and make it a bit more understandable. And he says that the Bible Trevor says a similar thing. Hashem, of course, is aware of every event that happens to a person. Hashgocha type 1. Or unless you're a big tzaddik, Hashem will not interfere with the events that unfold. Get you out of hot water, especially hot water that comes about when dealing with a Baal Bechira, when somebody else has wants to do harm to you. So again, like I just said, for most people, perhaps that Hashem is aware, but he doesn't intervene. For a few people, Hashem does intervene, and that's what the Rishonim held. According to Baal Shem Tov, Hashem is involved in everything. Nobody can harm you unless that you deserve it. Unless Hashem decides you deserve it. So that's a basic difference between the earlier sources and the later sources. The earlier source said other people might be able to harm you even though you don't deserve it. The Baal Shem Tov, and after him, people say no, unless you deserve it, it can't happen to you. So now again, he quotes my sister. When I bounce this topic off my wife, she reminded the Gemara that says that the principle that shluchei mitzvah does not come to harm does not apply when there's a clear and present danger at hand, that I just mentioned. In this fact, the Shmuel Navi sent as a shliach by Hashem to anoint David was afraid that Shaul hear about it and try and kill him. And according to Orach Chaim, how is this a proof? Perhaps the shliach mitzvah is protected through Hashem's hashgacha. When it comes to Baal Bechira, Shaul HaMelech, all bets are off. Right? So it could be that for most, if you're going to a place where a human being might kill you, then you might get hurt even though you shliach mitzvah. But what about a place where the lions and tigers and bears? So according to Orach Chaim, we would say that no, lions and tigers and bears, they can't kill you unless you deserve it. And a shliach mitzvah doesn't deserve to die because he is the protection of being shliach mitzvah. So therefore, one should say that the place where a shliach mitzvah can't go to be a place where other people who have free will can come and do harm to him, like bandits and murderers and such like. But where the issue is a natural thing, like hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanoes, or lions, tigers, and bears, perhaps even shliach mitzvah should be safeguarded because they don't have free will. How can they harm him? So my brother writes, perhaps this is very point. This is very important is what the Gemara writes means by Boria Zeka, where there's a clear and present danger. It was a precise ability of Shaul to do as he pleased as a Baal Bechira, which made the situation so dangerous. The problem is, if this is true, it means Boria Zeka is a very high bar. As many of the situations that are truly dangerous still do not measure up to the danger of confronting Baal Bechira. So actually, my brother-in-law remains with this question. It could be that only when a human being is involved is an issue. When it's not a human being, perhaps it's not an issue. And it says, update, would it be possible to say the show is not Baal Bechira, Lei Melachim, because Lei Melachim B'Yad Hashem? There's some who say that kings and presidents and all those leaders have a diminished free will. They don't have full free will because they are the ones who are necessary in order to bring about Hashem's plans for the world. So therefore, matters which how they function as kings and princes or other types of leaders, they have limited bechira because Hashem has a certain destiny he wants to bring about. So you might say that Shaul here was a regular type of danger, not a special type of danger, a person at bechira, because he's a king and whatever he does is monitored by Hashem. And then he asks, does that apply where Shaul would be acting in his personal interest and not as well as king? We always say that the president, if he decides to go to war, it's Hashem's doing it through him, and Hashem wanted the war to happen for whatever reason. But what about if the president decides to go to someplace dangerous, personally dangerous? Does Hashem also take away his bechira in that, or is he still a bechira in that respect? So I think a person who, even a king or a president or any other leader, only loses their bechira when it has to do with the purpose and destiny and the future of the world. In other cases, he certainly has bechira. So therefore, yes, Shaul was about bechira, and he could harm David, but also with this we can learn that any place where, if you're, even though you're shliach mitzvah, also level of shliach mitzvah, shliach mitzvah is a protection, but it's not full protection, and therefore it's a place where things can go wrong. You should be careful. Just like Shmuel, who wasn't afraid of any natural phenomena. He wouldn't be afraid of bears and tigers, volcanoes and tornadoes. But he was afraid of Shaul because Shaul had free choice and therefore could kill him even though he didn't deserve it. We are Lo Madrega, even the Shluchei Mitzvah, we have to be afraid even in cases where it's an animal or some other natural force which doesn't have a chira, which is the danger, which is opposed to us. Now, one more source for today. Actually, I want to go back there. Okay, so I wrote here, this is from my blog, and I wrote, I did not write the article, the response, but I agree with the response. It's about Hashgocho Protis. So bear in mind, I didn't write this, but the great miracle of volcano shutdown. Universal crisis, millions of people stranded, billions of dollars lost, and one volcanic eruption in Iceland causes chaos across the European continent. With all this tumult, one Jew merits a smile from the creator of the world. As if God was whispering to him, my son, the whole world is not created except for you. The story begins with a young yeshiva student, 18-year-old Yerushalmi, kid from Yerushalayim, who was mortally ill with pulmonary hepatic failure. I have no idea what that is. It's some liver disease. With little hope of receiving a liver transplant in Israel, Rav Führer, who's one of the people in Israel who has tremendous connections and insight about how to help people who are in grave illnesses, sought to send the boy an emergency flight to Brussels, the world center of liver transplants. The only problem, however, is that Brussels, under no circumstances, transplants non-European Union patients in order to save the scanty supply of livers for Europeans. So a boy from Eretz Yisrael has no chance of getting a liver there. Nevertheless, it was decided to send him to Brussels despite this knowledge. They sent him anyway. The youngster had no choice but to include his name on the long waiting list for liver transplant, which he was almost for sure not going to get. In the meantime, he tried to maintain his learning despite his illness, consciously aware it would take weeks, months, and even years until he was able to be given a new liver, by which time he might be dead. Many patients were on the waiting list. His name was somewhere on the bottom. And when his turn finally arrived, it had to completely match his blood type, other medical criteria, other medical standards. Not a perfect match, he didn't need to continue waiting for a miracle. However, Rabos Machshavos believe Ish Vatsas Hashem Yisakum. Hashem has people many thoughts, but Hashem has his thoughts. Many thoughts are to man's head, nevertheless the counsel of Hashem will stand. Hashem had a different plan for this young yeshiva student, and Hashem's loyal servants produced avalanches of hot ash, rock, and gas, means the volcanoes, and causing Europe to completely shut down the skies into no-fly zone. No flights could take off. It was during this time that young Yerushalmi was sitting in yeshiva learning Torah in the capital of Belgium. During the course of the shutdown airspace above Europe, a person died in the hospital in the capital of Europe, Belgium. A person who had agreed to donate his liver to anyone who might need it. Astonishingly, a liver that was perfectly parametric, that's the wrong term, but it was perfect match for a young yeshiva student. Health authorities in Belgium began searching the liver transplant waiting list, but unfortunately, not even one patient was able to fly into Belgium for the healthy liver due to the volcanic eruption. As they advanced further the waiting list, they reached the young yeshiva student, but was not offered to him due to his lack of citizenship. As Chak closed in a deadline for the time within which the liver would still be viable, however, no one else was able to arrive in Belgium for transplant except this young Yerushalmi. With clear divine intervention, this budding Talmid Chacham received the liver and is now recovering from surgery. The enormity of this miracle was even greater after the successful transplant. The doctor said the young student's liver was very deteriorated and diseased, and was a matter of days before it stopped functioning completely. Doctors unanimously believe that if he had continued to wait for transplant, he would not have survived. Who can understand the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So I don't remember who wrote this response either, but it's a very important response. I have a real problem with these stories in general, and I guess this case really underscores why. Just imagine the other stories that are not being circulated on the internet. Young mother, child, groom, whoever on a waiting list, desperate for a transplant, the right liver finally available, and he finally atop the list, but could not fly to Belgium to the volcano. Rahman Islam passed away. I don't know what happened to whom regarding this liver, but neither of those circulating the story know whose heart could be breaking as they read it. Hashem's ways are indeed mysterious and above our logical comprehension system. But let's not pretend that Hashgacha always works out for the apparent good of everyone affected. I have been thinking we in our generation, especially from an educational standpoint, our young people, are more in need of examples of tzedek adin, knowing that when things go wrong, that Hashem is doing the right thing and moving forward in life despite disappointment, loss, and suffering. I'm not going to be able to finish this paragraph. So, this, in any event, he says we have to understand that Hashgacha Protis works both ways if we believe in Hashgacha Protis. He says we have wishful thinking, and therefore we have to make sure that Hashgacha Protis, if you believe in it, which now we all believe in it, works both ways. That Hashem knows what He's doing, and Hashem sometimes, for some people, makes it work this way, and for other people, makes it work that way because He has the master plan. And the master plan means that everything fits into Hashgacha based on the master plan. Can things change in that master plan? Yes, the things can change it. But the point is that Hashgacha Protis, you don't believe just in good, you believe Hashem knows what He's doing. Okay, we'll stop here for tonight because we're about to run out of time anyway.